Harlem in the 1930s, a world alive with sound, color, and movement. The rhythm of jazz poured from smoky clubs, spilling into the streets, where men in sharp pinstripe suits and women in elegant evening gowns moved under the glow of neon signs. Street vendors called out their wares. Children weaved through crowds, and the scent of roasted peanuts and fresh bread lingered in the air. But beneath the music and the laughter, another empire was rising, one built not on melodies, but on power, business, and strategy. At the center of it all stood a man who would come to define Harlem's underworld, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy wasn't just another gangster. He was something far more dangerous, a man with vision. He was sharp, disciplined, and willing to take risks that others wouldn't. To the people of Harlem, he was more than a crime boss. He was a protector, a businessman, and, for many, a symbol of resistance against the oppressive forces that sought to control their world. But even for a man as bold as Bumpy, true power wasn't something taken alone. It was something built, and his rise to dominance would not have been possible without one of the most feared crime bosses of the time, Charles Lucky Luciano. Luciano was a different kind of gangster. Where others ruled through brute force and tradition, he ruled through innovation. He didn't care about race or old world loyalties. He cared about efficiency. And in Harlem, he saw more than a territory. He saw opportunity. Together, these two men would form an unlikely alliance, not just controlling Harlem's underworld, but redefining organized crime itself. Their partnership would create a system that would shape the criminal underworld for generations.
Put your hands up for stories untold, echoes of glory and hearts so bold. We dig deeper where the truth will glow, forgotten history, let the rhythm flow.
If you love uncovering hidden stories of history's most fascinating figures, make sure to subscribe to the Forgotten History channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. We bring you gripping, untold stories from the past, stories of power, ambition, and the moments that shaped history in ways you never imagined. What do you think about Bumpy Johnson and Lucky Luciano's partnership? Was it a brilliant business move or a dangerous gamble? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into history, hit that like button. It helps us bring more incredible stories your way. Bumpy Johnson wasn't born into power. He came from Charleston, South Carolina, a world far removed from the glittering lights of Harlem. Raised in poverty, he learned early that life didn't give second chances. He was book smart, but his sharp mind wasn't just for school. It was for survival. He read poetry and philosophy, but he also understood the unspoken rules of the street. When Bumpy arrived in Harlem, he had little more than ambition and an unshakable belief in himself. The streets were tough, but Bumpy was tougher. He quickly learned that Harlem had its own economy, one that operated outside the banks and stock markets, the numbers racket. This underground lottery was the lifeblood of the community, a game where locals bet pennies and dimes in hopes of striking it big. But behind the scenes, it was a multi-million-dollar industry controlled by gangsters and power brokers. Bumpy started at the bottom, just another kid running numbers for the bosses. But he wasn't content with being a foot soldier. He was smart, observant, and fearless. He knew that in Harlem, the right combination of brains and muscle could open doors that were locked for most men like him. And so, with calculated moves and unwavering determination, he climbed the ranks. Meanwhile, across town, Charles Lucky Luciano was building an empire of his own. The Italian Mafia had always ruled through old world traditions, loyalty, blood ties, and endless turf wars. But Luciano had no patience for outdated codes. To him, crime was a business, and businesses thrived on efficiency, not emotions. Where old bosses saw racial divides, Luciano saw profit. He didn't care if a man was black, Irish, or Jewish. If he could make money, he was useful. And Harlem's booming numbers racket, that was an untapped gold mine. Luciano had the muscle, but he needed someone on the inside, someone with the respect of the Harlem underworld, someone like Bumpy Johnson. Their paths were about to cross, and when they did, they wouldn't just change Harlem's underworld, they would revolutionize organized crime forever. Their partnership was unconventional. The Italian Mafia had long dominated the criminal underworld, ruling with an iron grip over gambling, racketeering, and smuggling. But Harlem was different. The numbers game wasn't an Italian operation. It was a black enterprise, deeply woven into the fabric of the community. It was more than just gambling. It was a financial system that supported Harlem's economy, funding small businesses, paying off corrupt cops, and keeping money circulating within the neighborhood. And at the center of it all, Bumpy Johnson. Luciano could have tried to take Harlem by force, as many before him had attempted, but he was smarter than that. He saw the futility in a bloody turf war when a better option was available. Why not work together? If Bumpy could keep the numbers racket running smoothly, Luciano's syndicate could reap the rewards without lifting a finger. It was a simple equation. Harlem needed protection, and the Mafia needed profits. Through late-night meetings in the back rooms of Harlem's most exclusive clubs, Bumpy and Luciano forged a mutual understanding. Luciano provided the muscle, political connections, and financial backing, ensuring that Harlem's operations remained untouched by outside threats. In return, Bumpy ensured that the numbers game flourished, funneling a cut of the profits back into the larger Mafia syndicate. This was organized crime like never before. Power was no longer dictated by race or tradition, but by money and influence. With Luciano's reach and Bumpy's deep ties to Harlem, their empire became untouchable. Under their leadership, the underground economy in Harlem exploded. The numbers racket had never been more profitable. Businesses, nightclubs, and illicit operations flourished under their protection, and their alliance became the backbone of Harlem's criminal empire. Harlem wasn't just surviving, it was booming. As their empire grew, so did their influence. Bumpy Johnson was no longer just a gangster. He had become a power broker, a figure of respect and authority in Harlem. To some, he was a criminal, but to many in the community, he was a guardian, a man who ensured Harlem's prosperity, even if the money came from the underground. With pockets full of cash and influence stretching beyond the criminal underworld, Bumpy gave back. He used his wealth to help struggling families, handing out rolls of cash to those in need. He paid for funerals, helped small black-owned businesses stay afloat, and even bailed out those who had been unjustly arrested, knowing that the law in Harlem was often stacked against his people. More than just a kingpin, Bumpy became a symbol of defiance against oppression. And when corrupt law enforcement tried to shake down his operations or mistreat Harlem's citizens, Bumpy wasn't afraid to push back, with bribes, with leverage, and, when necessary, with force. But while Bumpy built his power in Harlem, Luciano was reshaping organized crime itself. Unlike the old bosses who clung to ethnic divisions and endless feuds, Luciano had a vision, a syndicate where profit trumped personal vendettas. He dismantled the old mafia traditions, eliminating anyone who stood in his way, and replaced them with a structured, corporate-style hierarchy. He created the Commission, a governing body that ensured all major mafia families across the country operated like a single business empire. For the first time, organized crime was centralized, disciplined, and nearly impossible to take down. His influence stretched far beyond Harlem, beyond New York, beyond the East Coast, into the very fabric of crime across America. Every major criminal operation, from bootlegging to gambling to labor racketeering, now answered to Lucky Luciano's vision. And standing right beside him, ruling Harlem's streets with an iron grip, was Bumpy Johnson. What started as an unlikely alliance between two men from vastly different worlds had become one of the most powerful underworld partnerships in history. Bumpy controlled Harlem. Luciano controlled the entire syndicate. Together, they were untouchable. By the late 1930s, Bumpy Johnson and Lucky Luciano had done the impossible. They hadn't just built an empire, they had redefined the business of crime. In an era where race dictated power, they shattered the old rules, proving that money and influence were stronger than tradition and prejudice. For Harlem, Bumpy was more than just a crime boss. He was a legend. His name carried weight, not just in the underworld, but in the community. To the people of Harlem, he was a protector, a man who had fought to keep the wealth of the numbers racket inside the neighborhood. He used his position to ensure that Harlem's people, his people, were never at the mercy of outsiders. He was living proof that Black enterprise could thrive, even in an era of deep racial inequality. For Luciano, Harlem was proof of concept. He had transformed organized crime into a corporate empire, one that ran like a business machine rather than a chaotic underworld of vendettas and infighting. With the commission in place, he had laid the foundation for the mafia's dominance for decades to come. Together, Bumpy Johnson and Lucky Luciano didn't just rule the streets, they changed the game. They had reached the pinnacle of power, and their influence would echo through history long after their time had passed. History is filled with stories just like this, stories of power, ambition, and unlikely alliances that changed the course of the world. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe to the Forgotten History channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. What do you think about Bumpy Johnson and Lucky Luciano's rise to power? Were they visionaries who redefined the game, or just two men who played their cards right in a dangerous world? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps us bring even more incredible stories your way.